The Ark of Omen campaign was a major galaxy-wide offensive that was launched by Abaddon the Spoiler and his armies. Its purpose was to complete a mysterious MacGuffin known as the Key that can be used on the lock to activate the weapon. Yeah, I'm not joking. This is literally what they're called. And this weapon has the power to destroy the Imperium. Not that original, but moving on. The campaign began as part of the Greater War of Beasts, not to be confused with the War of the Beast, when Black Legion forces led by Warpsmith Vask engaged in the Vigilius war zone, raided the Mechanicum artificial moon of Peragamatros. After launching a Daita assault upon the moon's power and control systems, which revealed the hidden moon's location, the Black Legion vessel Unrepentant appeared in the system. Despite formidable defenses, including defense lasers, Skitari, and the maniple of Reaver Titans of the Legio Maledictus, Vask and the Dark Mechanicus Magos Versophora Hexen led overwhelming forces which swept aside their foes. Dark Magos Jurg was able to penetrate the moon's data vaults, hoping to gather data for the Spoiler's favor. However, unknown to the Magos, the data tome he brought back to the Vengeful Spirit was part of a greater plan by the demon Vashtor. Months later, as Abaddon oversaw the continued repairs to his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, the data tome proved to be a portal that allowed Vashtor to manifest on the bridge directly in the presence of the Despoiler. Upon meeting, Vashtor presented Abaddon with a prophecy of a burning sky and stars blazing bright enough to drown out the darkness. He was candid with the Despoiler, declaring that while the ruler of the Forge of Souls, he was unsatisfied with his status and wished to become a fifth Chaos God in his own right. Vashtor believed this could be achieved if he could fulfill this prophecy and offered an alliance with Abaddon. The Despoiler was unimpressed, and Vashtor bid that they move together on the nearby world of Magdalor to demonstrate the value of an alliance where the next fragment of this mysterious key lay. Part 1. Abaddon Strikes. Revelation on Magdalor. Magdalor was the homeworld of the troubled Iron Angel Space Marine chapter. Despite their replenished gene seed stock and numbers, they nonetheless sported a formidable fleet and committed themselves to fight to the end upon the arrival of the Vengeful Spirit in their system. As battles erupted across space between the Iron Angels and Traitors' armadas, several hundred Iron Angels manned the formidable defenses of their fortress monastery known as the Angel's Crown. Black Legion and cultist forces landed on the surface of Magdalor, while the Despoiler, Falcus Kyber, and his Bringers of Despair launched a teleportation assault into the heart of the Angel's Crown. After defeating 3 Iron Angels librarians, it became clear that the Iron Angels' resistance was ultimately doomed as their forces were overwhelmed by the Traitors' onslaught. After having crushed the last serious resistance, Abaddon set out sacking the fortress monastery, but discovered scenes of carnage and demonic corruption deep within its walls. Someone had already torn out the heart of the Angel's Crown, and soon enough Abaddon met the shackled demons and muted engines of Vashtor's own host. Here, the Iron Angels chapter master Naimarn and the last of the first company were staging a final stand. However, thanks to Vashtor's horrifying monstrosities erupted from the machineries of the Apothecarian and the Reclusium as Abaddon himself struck down Naimarn. After the battle, Vashtor's forces ignored all but a tall marble pillar floating in a suspensor field. Dubbed the Oathing Stone by the Iron Angels, Abaddon was initially unimpressed with the pillar, but after hours of close meeting with Vashtor, was informed of his true nature. After learning of his true purpose as a fragment of the key, Abaddon let out a great laugh and became committed to working with Vashtor. Over the next several months, the Black Legion began to corral and mutate enormous space hulks under the direction of Vashtor, having spent many days and heavy casualties clearing these constructs of various foes. Vashtor used his techno-sorcery to corrupt the hulks even further. Various Chaos champions, either commanded by or allied to Abaddon, were placed in charge of these reborn space hulks, which soon became known as the Arks of Omen, and their purpose was to assail worlds throughout the galaxy to secure future fragments of the key. Each Ark was commanded by a champion of Chaos, either one of Abaddon's own subordinates or an allied Chaos Lord that had pledged fealty to the Despoiler. The Arks Unleashed. Even as Vashtor labored to construct additional arcs, Abaddon unleashed those he had already built upon the galaxy. More than a dozen arcs made up this initial onslaught, each accompanied by a flotilla of chaos vessels in dark contrast to the fleets of the Indomitus Crusade. Notable assaults launched in the first wave were conducted against the ice moons of Korbrach and the industrial sprawls of Vaingloria. After weeks of bloody siege on the shrine world of Lume IV, Iron Warrior's warsmith Tsagra, commander of the Ark of Omen Ogre, tore open the world's innermost reliquarium to secure a key fragment which took the form of an ancient fire-blackened cogitator, bank held in a stasis field. On Hasp, Alpha Legion agents penetrated an ancient dig site to secure a key fragment that appeared to be a meteorite embedded in the planet's bedrock. Upon recovery of a key fragment, they were presented before the warp portal aboard each Ark and claimed by Abaddon and Vashtor. On Agamendes, the Ark Bloodmaw and its escorts began a month-long conflict against the manifolds of Graia that saw entire planets depopulated. Amidst the Rasputar cluster, the Bane of Life plunged into an ongoing war between the leagues of Votan of the Kronos hegemony and the Orc Wa, Skullkraka. At the Serpesa Nebula, Flenmaster Tvak of the Night Lords found his Baal fleet beset at every turn by Eldar of Ultwi and Dark Eldar of the Cabal of the Iron Throne. By the time the second wave of Arks of Omen was launched, the corrupted hogs were now present across every Imperium segmentum and many major war zones. Sometimes they ignored Imperial holdings altogether, targeting worlds inhabited by orcs, Tyranids, or even other heretic factions to claim their prize. Had it not been for the presence of the Arks themselves, Imperial authorities would not have placed these incidents as part of a larger pattern. Famed Lord Inquisitor Kotaz of the Ordo Malleus received word from the Eldar of the larger Chaos plan. The Inquisition responded accordingly with investigation teams to the Baal fleet's true purpose, and while several Arks were boarded and purged at great cost during the Imperial counterattack, many more continued to wreak havoc upon the galaxy. Cortosa III. One of the most notable Chaos assaults took place on the fortress world of Cortosa III. Garrisoned by over 200 Imperial Guard regiments, at the heart of its Fortum Primus was a martial museum which held a key fragment in the shape of a sword. However, thanks to its Psyker Seers, the High Command of the world had foreseen the Chaos assault even before it arrived, and thus when the Ark Ogre arrived in system, it faced not only the Imperial Guard, but also a Sister of Battle Covenant and the Black Templar forces. Due to the Ark's advanced navigational system, it was able to bypass these loyalist reinforcements and rapidly assault Cortosa III itself. The assault was led by the Sons of Rot under Guthrog the Blighted, who sought not only to acquire the key fragment for Abaddon, but also secure the planet in Nurgle's name. To that end, Lord Guthrog deployed the Plague Crows and Vermin Guard while dealing with the Imperial fleet in the system, while he, the Sons of Rot, his Mordibax Traitor Guard regiments, Dark Mechanicus Vivisectors, and Chaos Knights of House Gnaw launched an assault on Cortosa itself. After ferociously contested landings, fighting erupted across the Munifica Maxima, the fortified mountain range of Absolutis Colossi, and the training plains of the Expanse Martial. Viral weapons reduced thousands of loyalists to a bubbling slime, out of which demons of Vashtor emerged. However, a huge loyalist armored spearhead swept between the towers of Arcadia Bastilus and into the Expanse Martial, throwing back House Gnaw knights. At the same time, a vicious orbital battle erupted as the Imperial reinforcements attempted to punch through the traitor blockade. Costly boarding action saw vessels on both sides scattered and destroyed. In the end, the Imperial Defenders' unity proved to be the traitors' undoing, at least as far as the Sons of Rot were concerned. As rival Chaos warbands fought on their own, Guthrog was forced to abandon command of the ground war and return with many of his own Sons of Rot to garrison his Ark against Imperial assaults. This was the moment the Alpha Legion forces concealed within the traitors had awaited for, and they hijacked Vox channels, which caused a portion of the traitor host to abandon their position and throw themselves at Fortum Primus. The frenzied assault succeeded in penetrating the fortress and securing the key fragment, but traitor positions across the greater system fell apart. Reprisals. By the second wave, it was becoming clear these Chaos assaults were part of a greater strategic coordination and not isolated Space Hulk raids. Despite this, it was still difficult for the foes of Chaos to understand what Abaddon's goal was or where his arcs would appear next. As the arcs drove deeper into the furthest reaches of the void, they attracted the attention of alien horror such as the Kalavasi and the Enslavers, who managed to damage the Ark Blackened Tower. The Ark's sobbing god soon found itself boarded by swarms of High Fleet Kraken, forcing Scourge Master Ulgata and his surviving forces to retreat deep into their vessel and resist the invaders. Despite these setbacks, the Arks continued on their mission. On the tomb world of Vol, the Ark Beast in Scarlet caught the slumbering Sazarek dynasty Necrons unaware and tore the key fragment from them before departing. Unbeknownst to the Thousand Suns sorcerer lord Hasomet, however, the slain Necron lord Somatateg was promptly resurrected and outraged by the dishonorable attack. He gathered a fleet of his own and set out to bring vengeance down upon the Beast in Scarlet. At the Onapla system, the Ark of Omen Colossus translated into local space. Boasting a huge complement of traitor titans, the Balefleet scattered the defenders as dark magi and their servants descended upon the rich worlds of Onalapa to sate their greed. This proved an opening which allowed the Ultramarines under Chaplain Julianus to board the Colossus. While nearly every Ultramarine on the boarding party was lost, they succeeded in causing an engine meltdown to destroy it. Meanwhile, Eldar Corsairs of the Diamond Talon boarded the Ark Devourer of Hope, crippling its command center. Another Balefleet under Lady Maev of House Grendil arrived in the Polyhedra system, expecting to claim their prize from local orcs. Instead, they found a thriving enclave of the Greater Tornian League. Squatkin had long since sliced apart the world Maev sought, the key fragment having since been moved into the galactic core. Before she could disengage and pursue her prize, however, she sought to punish the squats for what they had done. Soon, a savage battle erupted. Other Xenos forces actively sought out the Balefleet to destroy them, such as Kraflor Ultwi, Saimhan, Yemlok, and their allies including Harlequins, Dark Eldar, Corsairs, and Exodites. Meanwhile, the Inquisitor Kotias was continuing his investigation into what the Eldar had warned him of. He and other Inquisitors relinquished large resources to intercept and if possible destroy the Arks wherever they appear. The Inquisition succeeded in having the Iron Hands under Captain Alabar board the Morbidius, as well as the mysterious destruction of the Reaper's Shadow. As the Ark Night Terror bore down on the agri-world of Sangana's Belt deep in the Imperium Nihilis, its regent Dante led a counterattack. However, when they arrived, they found the Balefleet wrecked, the corpses of dead Astartes withered in bolter rounds and withered in sulphurous residue. Ironically, many of the Arks were assailed by their fellow traitor Astartes, either to foil Abaddon's plans or for their own agenda, or simply to capture one of the vessels. Such was the case of an Ark which went missing in Red Corsair's territory within the Maelstrom. For their part, the Wordbearer broke the bindings placed upon the Ark Neverlight, unleashing a tide of demonic entities that consumed the attackers, defenders, and nearby mining world of Carmine. After the Ark Darge Discordant was scuttled by coordinate forces at the Chiron system, while in search for a more significant key fragment, Abaddon took to the field directly to shatter the host. He then took his forces to Chiron Tertius, resolved to claim the fragment. In the ensuing battle against the Imperial Guard, the Despoiler succeeded in smashing aside the Cadians and claiming the fragment. However, it was during the battle on Chiron Tertius that Abaddon was informed by Vashtor that Angron had been spotted on the world of Malakabel, a location of an important key fragment. The Red Angel was battling Indomitus Crusade Fleet Quartus, and Vashtor notified Abaddon that he wished to travel to Malakabel himself to deal with the situation. Part 2. Angron. Portraits and Preparations. Much to the misfortune of the Imperium, Angron had recently returned to the Materium aboard the Conqueror. Around the Demon Primar gathered a force which included noted World Eater Chaos Lords such as Kolax and Karka Bloodfist, as well as other Chaos Space Marine warbands and even Xenos mercenaries. The reborn Red Angel made way for Malak Baal in search of a beacon which had been tormenting him with this psychic light known as the Coral Engine. The engine had recently been aiding the Indomitus Crusade Fleet Quartus in a string of victories, but to the forces of chaos it was the anathema much like the light of the Astronomicon. Even before discovering the Red Angel had returned, the Grey Knights, under the 4th Brotherhood Brother Captain Dristan Krom, dispatched the strike cruiser Unrelenting to the Malak system to investigate warp anomalies. There, Krom met with Fleet Master Trink Abconchis, and they discussed the nature of the Coral Engine. Krom next traveled to the surface of Malak Bel and questioned Inquisitor Glory Magna, quickly summarizing that a vast traitor host would soon be drawn to its light. He quickly notified the Imperials at the Malak system to ready themselves for war. Afterwards, he would discover the true origin of the Coral Engine. In the aftermath of Krom's visits, Abcondis ordered many battle groups send whatever reinforcements that could be spared back to Malak Bel to strengthen its defenses. Soon enough, Admiral Inganchu Spell arrived with 3 task forces from Battle Group Betaris, while Group Master Zadavan Meo arrived with 4 task forces of Battle Group Dominus. Cananis Veriticade of the Order of the Argent Shroud arrived aboard the Dauntless-class light cruiser Mercy and Death. Group Master Persefa Seng and her ancient nemesis class fleet carrier Bountiful Hate came at the head of 5 task forces from Battle Group Jovia. Group Master Josiah Bolest III of Battle Group Kilox arrived, leading 2 full task forces. Even Space Marines in the form of the Void Talons chapter arrived under Chapter Master Yosaro Dugal himself. The forces of Battle Group Alpha were deployed throughout the Malak system, which Abcondis aboard his flagship Honor of Terra hung in orbit over Malak Bel itself, along with 2 task forces worth of warships. Other task forces were assigned to guard Malakra and Malakshet, which Task Force X under Group Master Ira Teronador was broken into smaller squadrons to conduct patrols. Battle Group Fortrax was assigned to watch the Malakandris asteroid belt known as the Barren Reach. Around the Coral Engine itself, the Imperials erected a great bastion known as the Fortress of Light. Soon enough, the forces of the Malak system were colossal and its defenses were beyond imposing. However, after a full week of waiting, there was still no sign of the invaders, and many, including Fleet Master Abcondis, grew doubtful that an attack was coming, and became frustrated that these great resources could be better used elsewhere. Thus, he was almost relieved when on the 7th hour of the 8th day that a large chaos fleet burst from the warp at the edge of the Malak system. Battle of the Malak. At the head of the Chaos Fleet, large enough to conquer an entire sector, was the Ark of Omen Stygian Heart. They included not only conventional vessels, but also ship-sized demon engines. The Chaos Forces made straight for Malak Bel, ignoring all other worlds in the system for now. Such a force would have initially created great panic for the Imperials, but Abcondis and the rest of his staff were well prepared. He immediately ordered Group Master Terandor and Zenk to lead their forces to intercept, while ordering defense fleets over Malak Var, Malak Shit, and Malak Bel to act as a second wave. Such was the size of the Imperial fleet that thousands of torpedoes struck the Chaos Armada simultaneously. Despite taking great damage, the Chaos vessels fought with great skill and ferocity and inflicted similar losses on the Imperials. Their every action seemed calculated to push near Malak Bel while also buying time, as if they were waiting for something. However, a boarding attack by the Void Tridents against the Red Corsair Desecrator class battleship and the destruction of a Repulsive class Grand Cruiser succeeded in seemingly turning the tide. Abcondis grew more confident and began to feel as if he should have called the Grey Knight's warning alarmist. It was then that everything changed for the Imperials, in a matter of seconds no less. The disaster began when astropaths of Malak Bel plunged into the Coral Engine began to scream. Then the divining mirrors of the Grey Knights broke apart. Soon enough, a second traitor fleet far greater in size than the first began to arrive in system. Looming over it all was the Conqueror, atop which perched Angron himself. Perhaps unusually lucid for the rageful avatar of Khorne, Angron carefully divided his fleet into 3 thrusts like a trident. The first prong formed around the Ark of Omen Calarian Dire and tore away towards Malakra, a feint to force the world's defenses to dig in. It was then instructed to use Malakra's gravity well to slingshot themselves recklessly through the enemy's lines towards Malak Bel. The second prong, led by the World Eater's battle barge Exsanguinator, climbed rapidly above the galactic plane to bore down on the fringes of Malakandri's asteroid belt to assault Malak Bel's defenses head-on. Angron on the Conqueror led the third prong, arching close to the star Malak itself before powering up from below the galactic plane to give a killing thrust at Malak Bel itself. For their part, the Imperials responded quickly, but were beset by both panic and grim determination. Angron's war cry had reached the ears of every soul within the system, and all knew the Red Angel had come to slaughter. Commissars had to put down maddened riots aboard both vessels and planetside. Yet for every ship or bastion that fell into panic, there was another that retained discipline and order. For many within Fleet Quartus, this was not the first time they had fought the forces of chaos. Abcondis himself faced the new threat with a surprising enthusiastic readiness. After quickly reforming his lines, Abcondis ordered Group Master Terondar to abandon her pursuit of the damaged Stygian heart and return to him. However, many other Imperial fleets and garrisons in system were undermanned to meet a threat of this scale, and amongst the first casualties was Task Force 6 of Battle Group Fortrax. While they had initially joined with the Void Talons under Captain Ugoshi to conduct hit-and-run attacks from the asteroid belt against the fleet of the Insanguinator, they were quickly overwhelmed by the size of the enemy force. The Void Talons failed in their attempt to board World Eater vessels, being pushed back by frenzied counterattacks. Captain Ugoshi himself was slain in one such fight, and in the end, only some ships of the Demon Prince Dregar Or took the bait to move into the asteroid belt to be destroyed. After the Insanguinator destroyed the Void Talon strike cruiser Noble Blade, Task Force 6 fragmented. Meanwhile, on the far side of the Malak system, the Clarion Dyer and his escort under Lord Karakra Bloodfist bore down upon the jungle world of Malakra with suicidal speed. Commanding from the Mars-class battlecruiser Cry of Rat, Admiral Ingatius Pell ordered his forces to blunt the enemy assault despite knowing his own assets were insufficient for such a task. 2 task forces had been dispatched to battle the Stygian Heart, and he now ordered them to return at all haste. At the same time, Sisters of Battle under Canoness Cade arrived over the ice world of Malakshet, eager to join the fight. She stripped 3 full task forces from Malakshet, leaving only a handful of formations to garrison the planet, then made for Malakra. Fortunately for the Imperials, the recall task forces arrived just minutes before the Chaos Fleet did. Pell ordered all his ships to open fire as the Chaos Armada simply rushed towards Malakra, seemingly on a collision course. Striking close to its atmosphere and deliberately allowing themselves to fall into Malakra's gravity well, the Chronate ships were able to swing themselves on their axis and veer straight into the scattered Imperial formation. Some failed in the risky maneuver and crashed into Malakra with catastrophic results for all involved, while others simply collided with Imperial ships. What followed was a great slaughter as the Clarion Dyer slingshotted itself through the Imperials' lines and onwards towards Malak Bel. In their wake, they left a mauled Imperial flotilla still trying to put itself back together and pursue. Only a timely teleportation assault by the Ultramarines of the strike cruiser Prandium prevented Pell himself from being killed by a World Eater's boarding party. Furious and dismayed, Pell sent word to Canoness Cade that she should make for Malak Bel. While he still had 8 full task forces around Malak Bel, the rest of the system was woefully underprepared to meet the chaos threat. He finally ascended to Group Master Terondar, allowing her and Zeng to lead the might of their system patrol force on an intercept course with the Conqueror. With almost 7 task forces at their command, the 2 Group Masters rallied from their battle against the Stygian Heart and launched a mighty counterattack. Their vessels included not only those of the Imperial Navy, but also those of the White Scars, Imperial Fists, Howling Griffins, and Basculon Astra. Carnage erupted as the 2 great fleets met. While the World Eaters still had the numeric advantage, the Imperials had the advantage in discipline. Soon enough, the Imperials were able to take advantage of the World Eaters' ships' tendency to fight like lone, feral dogs, to isolate and destroy them in piecemeal. 3 major vessels were destroyed in such a fashion. At the same time, the Imperial Fist Codicer Vorn Dilas led a boarding action on the World Eater ship Bloodied Fang and turned its lance batteries on its unsuspecting escorts. Hibojian Khan led his White Scars in a rapid attack that crippled 2 Chaos strike cruisers. Meanwhile, Group Master Terondar herself led the formation of 3 Imperial battleships, including her own Resplendent, to kill the Conqueror. As the 3 battleships converged on the Conqueror, the flagship suddenly powered forward and unleashed a vicious salvo which damaged the Oberon-class battleship Veracity and forced the already damaged Blade of Aquilant to abandon its attack run. Then it used its Ursus claws to ensnare the Resplendent and drag it in close. It was at this moment that the Red Angel himself took flight, tearing through the hull of the Conqueror and into the void of space before plunging towards the Resplendent. Despite nearly being torn in half by a lance blast, Angron plowed through an Imperial Navy frigate attempting to free the Resplendent and continued his dive towards the vessel. Angron was repeatedly blown to bits by Imperial fire, but rematerialized within seconds and eventually was able to materialize on the bridge of the Resplendent. Group Master Terondar died with honor as the crippling of her ship turned the tide of the wider battle in favor of the World Eaters. Soon enough, 4 Imperial capital ships were lost as well as the White Scar's battle barge, Steed of Kumblai. Seeing this new development, Xeng ordered a retreat as the World Eaters led a frenzied pursuit. By now, the Ex-Sanguinator and his fleet had attacked the defenses around Malak Bel itself as Fleet Master Apkondis sent Task Force Alpha 2 and Erasmus 7 out on flanking arcs, while Group Master Bolest led a screening force up to meet the front. The strategy worked in encircling elements of the traitor host and inflicting heavy casualties, forcing Lord Dregor to lose momentum but failing to halt the attack entirely. As Imperial orbital defenses hammered the World Eaters, the Ex-Sanguinator thundered on. However, just then, the Grey Knight strike cruiser Unrelenting leapt into the fray alongside Abscondis' own flagship and Chapter Master Dugals. The Imperials may have prevailed in this sudden attack had it not been for Angron, who had by now scattered the last of Zeng's ships and was plunging into the battle over Malak Bel. In his wake followed the rest of the World Eaters and was met by Dugal's forces while Abcondis sought to deal with the Ex-Sanguinator. What followed was a bloody stalemate as Angron himself plunged into the atmosphere of Malak Bel and towards the Coral Engine. That sounds pretty cool. Meanwhile, Canoness Cade finally met the Clarion Dire in battle, swinging alongside the enemy's spearhead and engaging in a running battle that wrought carnage on both sides. Cade led the last-ditch boarding assault aboard the Ark of Omen, leading not only Sisters of Battle but also Space Marines. However, soon enough, all contact with these brave invaders were lost, and none ever disclosed their fate. One clue may lie with the fact that the Clarion Dire plunged suddenly into the warp just before it was to reach Malak Bel. Planetfall. Angron quickly arrived over the central dome of the Coral Engine, with some small part of him perhaps wishing that its energies may finally destroy him for good. Enduring a punishing salvo by the Imperial defenses, Angron managed to reach the Fortress of Light and slaughter all he came across. Slaying Space Marines and downing Valkyries, Angron fought his way into the Citadel missile silos and caused a catastrophic chain reaction that annihilated all within. Angron continued to fight his way deep into the interior of the fortress, the energy of the Coral Engine and his own butcher's nails mixing together in a discord of agony upon his mind. Breaking down the gates to the fortress's inner sanctum, Angron was determined to destroy the Coral Engine forever. In space, Abscondis continued to wage a valiant defense as Admiral Pell managed to gain the upper hand against the fleet of the Clarion Dire. However, the Conqueror had now arrived and was battling in orbit over Malak Bel's upper atmosphere as the Void Talons, Imperial Fists, and Howling Griffins attempted to stop them. By now, Abscondis had learned of Angron's rampage inside the Fortress of Light and considered the gravest threat to his defense. He ordered the Honor of Terra to come about and rally the largest remaining vessels in a path towards the Conqueror and its invasion flotilla. The maneuver drew the attention of dozens of smaller Chaos vessels, with some plunging towards Abscondis' fleet while others sought to secure a secondary drop zone in order to land Titans. However, the World Eaters were able to use Dreadclaws to board the Honor of Terra. Despite counterattacks by Voidsmen, Ultramarines, and Under Lieutenant Scipion, and Castellan robots, the Imperials were quickly overwhelmed when Karn the Betrayer and his Butcher Horde entered the Imperial flagship. Lieutenant Scipion informed Abscondis that if he wished to live, he would have to abandon the ship. Abscondis issued an order for all combat-capable crew to abandon the fight in orbit and redeploy on the surface to take part in the defenses of the Coral Engine, while hoping to turn around the situation on the ground. He also sought to hold out until naval reinforcements from Admiral Pell could turn the tide of battle. Back on Malak Bel's surface, Imperial ground forces fought on as best they could. These consisted of Knights of House Terran, Sisters of Battle from the Order of Our Martyr Lady, and the Imperial Guard regiments of the Death Corps of Krieg, and Ultua artillery. They desperately attempted to hold back traitor titans at a great cost, with the Dark Mechanicum engines slaughtering thousands for each loss of their own. About their feet, Twisted, Skitarii, and Servitor snatched up loyalists for experimentation. Outnumbered, Krieg platoons did all they could to hold the heretic back, often dying to the last man in the process. In Malak's Baal's southern hemisphere, the great spaceport city of Hallowed Helm burned at the hands of Lord Invocatus. Despite the best efforts of the Son of Medusa and Imperial Fist, the traitor orbital bombardment had wreaked great destruction as World Eater tanks and demon engines came in Invocatus' wake. Invocatus plowed through the Imperial formations, refusing to get bogged down in the Imperial Fist's fortified positions by simply outflanking them. All across the world, sacred sites such as the Sanctum of the God Emperor Resplendent, the Temple of Mount Efanari, and the Library of the Star Pilgrims became bloody battlefields. Not even the arrival of Apkondis' reinforcements from space was enough to turn the tide. Apkondis and the Honor of Terra led a spearhead of warships in a desperate low-orbit attack run against the Conqueror, blowing apart multiple traitor vessels in his path, even as his own flagship was a battlefield at the hands of Karn the Betrayer. As the ships wrestled at close range in the upper atmosphere, the machine spirit of the Conqueror rebelled. Unwilling to be slain, the spirit triggered its warp engines and crash-translated into the Empyrean. By this time, Karn and his forces had finally reached Apkondis' bridge, and his last transmission was that of gunfire and screams. Soon enough, the slaughter of Malak Bel allowed coordinate demons to finally fully manifest on Malak Bel's surface. This caused a general disaster for the Imperial Guard regiments that soon turned into general rout despite the Coral Engine's light eventually forcing the creatures back into the warp. Nowhere was the bloodshed more horrific than within the Fortress of Light, where Angron was able to summon 8 bloodthirsters to his side alongside skull cannons, bloodletters, blood crushers, and even a Lord of Skulls. This terrifying host quickly swept aside the last of the Imperial defenses inside the Citadel's outer ring and reached the gatehouse to the inner sanctum. Angron and his bloodthirsters' honor guard slaughtered the final Imperial Fist standing in his way to reach the Coral Engine itself. Meanwhile, aboard the Exsanguinator, Brother Captain Crom and his Grey Knights continued their boarding assault. The Grey Knights managed to fight their way to the bridge of the vessel, confronting the Demon Prince Dregor. The battle there was savage and cost Crom many brothers, but they succeeded in banishing Dregor back into the warp. Robbed of its link to its master, the Exsanguinator began to die. While the loss of the vessel was a major blow to the Chaos forces, Crom cursed the time and resources it had cost. Crom then set about to teleporting to Malak Bel's surface in order to confront Angron. As the battle raged, the Stygian heart had limped away under orders by Apophari Quen, who sought to ascertain what actions should be taken. It was then that Vashtor, the Archiphane, materialized aboard the damaged Ark, the murder curse. It was then that Inquisitor Emagna's voice erupted over the Vox, issuing scorn to the traitors as she had her tech adepts disable the last failsafes over the barely understood Coral Engine. Convinced that the light of the Emperor shined through the engine and it could turn back the host, she amplified the power of the Coral Engine and let out a massive psychic shockwave. The blast caused Angron to tumble down from the air in agony and scour the demons from existence. Subsequent shockwaves followed, each decimating the traitor hosts, but also causing mortals to hear the psychic screams of the psychers enslaved to the engine in their own minds. The raw power triggered headaches, visions, strange voices, and other bizarre phenomenon. Yet despite all of this, Emagna's plan seemed to be working. Robbed of their demonic allies and with their cultists and traitor guard slaves shaken, the World Eater's momentum fell apart. Of the demons, only Angron and his 8 bloodthirsters remained, and even they were racked with pain. Regardless of this, they continued their frenzied advance towards the Coral Engine. Soon enough, the enraged but strangely invigorated Angron reached the inner sanctum of the Coral Engine. Angron was met by explosive placed by Emagna in an ambush by the Tempestus Scions and the 60 Grey Knights under Crom. The Space Marines began a banishment ritual as the Tempestus Scions fell in agony before the presence of the demon. Grey Knight Terminators and True Dread Knights closed on Angron, and the Demon Primarch finally fell to one knee. It was then that the first of Angron's bloodthirster bodyguards arrived, forcing to shift the Dreadnought's attention. Chaos erupted in the inner chamber and Inquisitor Emagna herself was beheaded by one of the creatures. Nonetheless, Crom and his paladins continued to close on Angron and complete their banishment ritual. The maddened Primarch threw itself at his attackers and, despite slaying multiple paladins, took a grievous blow from Crone's own nemesis Demon Hammer. The demon suffered another blow, but before the third could be delivered, Angron dropped Saminarius, the blade of the false gladiator, from his grip and grabbed the haft of Crom's hammer. He then brought Spinegrinder down with meteoric force, carving the brother captain in two. Finally cleared of obstacles, Angron moved on the coral engine and struck it with his own axe. In that moment, Angron's pure rage transformed himself into a supernatural conduit that connected both the materium and the immaterium. As he struck, he channeled not only his own rage, but that of the blood god itself. Khorne himself appeared in Angron's mind, invigorating him with the blood god's own blade. In this moment, the coral engine erupted in a great crimson explosion as Angron and his bloodthirsters were torn apart. Soon only Angron's incorporeal consciousness endured within the chamber. As Angron's physical form slowly regenerated, he saw Khorne's great murder curse, along with countless demons, erupt from the wound left in reality where the coral engine had stood. The destruction of the coral engine proved catastrophic for the Imperium. The blast tore Malak Bal itself in two and sent a wave of madness that swept across the entire system, killing nearly everyone planetside in minutes. While small numbers of Space Marines were successfully evacuated, many orbiting ships were forcefully thrown into the warp. Malak Var and even the distant Malak Shit suffered punishing debris storms from the death of Malak Bal, and the incoming fleet of Admiral Pell was pelted with wreckage of the world and suffered grievous losses. Even so, the dead were arguably the lucky ones. Within minutes of the death of Malak Bel, madness took hold of whatever Imperial survivors were left. Loyalists began to fall into berserker's madness, turning on one another and howling in rage to the blood god. The affected could no longer speak or recognize friend from foe. As carnage erupted across the remains of the Indomitus Crusade fleet, Quartus, seemingly random individuals were able to resist the madness, but only fell at the hands of their former allies. Aboard his own flagship, Admiral Pell was eaten alive by his own rabid crew. The Archiphane's Prize. It was into this madness that the Archiphane appeared at the head of the Stygian Heart. He rolled like some infernal boatsman into the devastation, seemingly immune to its effects. He moved on the ruins of Malak Bel, identifying the broken husks where the coral engine's geothermal siphon coil once existed. As he moved closer to the coil, now a great rune of Khorne, the Stygian Heart began to come apart, but he formed bits of the vessel to create a staircase. Vashtor moved forward to where the core of Malak Bel once stood. Taking a dark mass of the stone from the core of Malak Bel, the Archiphane then stepped through a warp portal, having achieved what he had set out to do. In the aftermath of the debacle at Malak Bel, nearly all of Fleet Quartus had been lost. The wave of madness had spread through the fleet navigators and astropaths, corrupting 80% of the battle groups Alpha, Betaris, Dominus, Fortrax, Erasmus, Jovia, and Kilox. Space Marines and Sisters of Battle fell as easily as Inquisitors, Priests, and Common Serfs. Only the Grey Knights, Sisters of Silence, and Custodes were truly immune. The disaster was exacerbated by the fact that the fragments of Fleet Quartus that remained began frenzied killing sprees across the galaxy, cutting bloody paths all the way back to the Imperium Sanctus and being declared excommunicate traitoris. The disaster would have far-reaching consequences for years to come. Part 3. The Siege of the Rock. Preparations. After Angron's destruction of Crusade Fleet Quartus, Vashtor sought to launch his own assault on the Rock, the mobile fortress monastery of the Dark Angels and one of the most formidable fortresses in the Imperium. Seeing another key fragment, he did not seek to undertake such a monumentous task alone, using his ties with Abaddon to mobilize several battle fleets and Chaos Space Marine forces from the Black Legion under Sorfas, Iron Warriors provided by Vashtor's sometimes ally Perturabo, and warbearers alongside his own cultist and demonic host known as the Cult of the Archifane. Vashtor himself rode at the head of the Ark of Omen, Orak Unleashed. Using his Ark's infernal artificial intelligence known as the Orak Myriad, Vashtor was able to locate the Rock and its escort fleet and developed a plan to ambush the Dark Angels and planned to use a diabolical warp weapon known as the Unmaker to bombard the fortress monastery void shield array known as the Gorgon's Aegis into submission. The world of Marin's Reach had recently cancelled its tie to the Imperium due to their need to defend themselves from a sudden Chaos Knight invasion. Unlike their distress calls, this drew swift attention from the Imperium and Fleet Primus Task Force 12 under Ultramarines Chief Librarian Varo Tigurius was dispatched to relieve the beleaguered world and restore its tribute payments. After learning their hated archenemy House Korvax was assailing Marin's Reach, House Raven proved eager to aid Tigurius in his task. The dark-hooded heretic Astartes, who were marching alongside the Chaos Knights, also drew the attention of the Dark Angels. Thus did the strike cruiser Impeccable Justice appear in the Valvire system with the complement of Ravenwing under Samael. After confirming the presence of Fallen, the Rock itself and its escort fleet carrying over half the chapter's strength appeared in the system. War for the Rock. Vashtor's assault came as the Dark Angel home fleet was rushing to the aid of Marin's Reach, having his own fleet materialize out of the warp at ambush angles, unleashing a punishing void salvo on the Dark Angel's fleet. Reacting quickly, Chief Librarian Ezekiel transferred fleet command to Samael and attempted to make full course towards Marin's Reach in order to link up with Task Force 12 as Samael dispersed his own ships to initiate a fighting retreat. The Dark Angel's fleet, however, suffered heavy losses, losing the warships the Revenged, Silent Sentinel, Primarch's Roar, Obsidian Stone, and Valiant Ire. Meanwhile, the damaged frigate Solemn Vow suffered a Gillar-fueled failure and was overrun by demons. The Dark Angels did not suffer alone, however, and a squad of Deathwing Knights was able to board the traitor Grand Cruiser Vandabraxis, taking control of its guns to destroy the vessel itself. The Impeccable Justice, meanwhile, unleashed waves of Ravenwing Black Knights piloting fighter craft to cripple several traitor vessels. The Rock and its fleet escorts managed to cripple a quarter of the traitor host, but ultimately failed to prevent the Dark Angel's home from being boarded. With the Dark Angel's fleet dispersed, the Rock now faced the Orak Unleashed alone. Utilizing gigantic energy projectors mounted on his Bale fleet escorts, Vashtor charged the Unmaker aboard the Orak Unleashed. The cannon aboard the Ark combined with the other energy projectors, unleashing a massive black of warp energy that disabled the Rock's void shield array known as the Gorgon's Aegis. The Archifane next launched a series of landing craft and boarding torpedoes, and the Rock itself was soon boarded as the Dark Angel's Master of the Forge sought to restore the Gorgon's Aegis. Aboard the Rock itself, Supreme Grand Master Azrael appointed Belial as overall commander of the Rock's defenses, while Ezekiel, Lazarus, Asmodai, and Azrael himself led detachments to turn every corridor of the Rock itself into a killing field. Despite the scale of the assault, the Archifane knew he was unlikely to fully capture the Rock or wipe out the Dark Angels. This was not his goal, however. He simply sought to drive the Dark Angels back as he ventured deep within the vaults of the Rock to acquire the prize he sought. The fight for the Rock broke into two distinct theaters. The first was upon the rocky plain surrounding the Rock's central command spire, known as the Tower of Angels. Here, Iron Warriors in Black Legion armor alongside hordes of demon engines drove on the surface of the Rock, threatening Belial's own strategium and emergency void shield generators. Belial ordered armored spearheads venture out and push back the traitor armor alongside a cadre of librarians and Ravenwing landspeeders. However, it soon became apparent that the traitors were content to tie up the Dark Angels and force Belial's forces in place. The second and most important theater was deep within the Rock itself, as the Archifane and his boarding party sought to claim their prize. Here, fast-moving elements of the Dark Angels 8 and 10 companies launched localized counterattacks against each fresh breach point. Meanwhile, layered defenses drawn from the remaining forces secured crucial intersections, corridors, lifts, and other facilities. The initial fighting was a confused race to staunch one wound after another as the full weight of the Chaos surprise attack came to bear. However, in the face of overwhelming Chaos assaults led by Black Legion Terminators and the World Bearers summoned demons, these Dark Angels detachments suffered grievous losses. But their sacrifice allowed time for a second layer of Dark Angels defenses to be erected, most notably in the Vault of Banners under Chaplain Asmodai. Here, Asmodai led 50 Battle Brothers and broke 4 successive Chaos assaults. In the Whispering Dome, Dark Angels, Dreadnoughts, and heavy weapons specialists fought a ferocious battle against the Iron Warriors Warsmith, Korang. While the Dark Angels scored some local victories, it became apparent that the main thrust towards the Forbidden Gate and Ascension Well stairway led by Vashtor himself could not be halted. Vashtor was aided by Xorophas and the World Bearer's Dark Apostle Garhoton in summoning great demonic hordes and converging to dive deep into the heart of the rock. Acting swiftly, Lazarus deployed holding forces through great chambers of the region known as the Galeria Aspecondal, while Azrael raced to bring elite reinforcements. Soon enough, Azrael and the Inner Circle emerged with his forces at the south wall of the Galerium Extractor in the expanse before the Nameless Gate. Fighting through both demons and Black Legionnaires, Azrael declared no foe would cross the Nameless Gate. During the fierce fighting that followed, Azrael slew Xorophos. With their leader dead, the remaining Chaos Space Marines fell back as demons covered their retreat. However, it was then that Vashtor and his own forces arrived, and the Archifane met Azrael himself in battle. As Ezekiel held off hordes of demons and Lazarus held the gate itself, the battle before the Nameless Gate exploded in savagery as Vashtor hacked into the Loyalist Vox, forcing many Dark Angels to remove their helmets or be driven mad. As the Archifane and Azrael traded blows, it became clear the Dark Angel could not win the fight despite his own prowess. It was then, however, that something distracted Vashtor, enough for Azrael to wound the demon and retreat back into his own lines. Meanwhile, in the void, the rock drew closer to Marwen's reach as Belial left the Strategium in the Tower of Angels to take to the field himself alongside a retinue of death-winged knights, the Dark Master. It was then that the distraction Vashtor had felt made itself known. All the lights aboard the rock went out, and the shadow began to dance. The Fallen, alongside new warbands of Warbearers and Alpha Legion, emerged from these shadows, marching towards at the head of an unsuspected host. Chaos Knights of House Kvorax manifested outside the Tower of Angels, assailing Loyalist and Traitor armor both. At the head of his host was Be'lakor, the Dark Master and hated foe of Vashtor. Utter bedlam erupted throughout the Galerium Extractor as the battle turned into a three-sided bloodbath. Fortunately for the Imperials, the interruption allowed the Dark Angels to consolidate their position and regain strategic momentum. Amidst the chaos, Vashtor and Be'lakor began a fearsome duel. Ultimately, by draining the power of a nearby machinery and void shields, Vashtor was able to summon enough energy to overcome Be'lakor's shadows. However, the Dark Master still smiled a mocking grin and chided the Archifane for his hubris. Be'lakor stated that none of Vashtor's plans mattered now, for they were all about to be undone. To that, they need only to look out into space and see that Task Force 12 had finally arrived to aid the Rock. It was then revealed that Be'lakor had engineered the invasion of Marwen's Reach in the first place. As Tigurius' fleet closed in, Knights of House Raven were landed on the Rock and did battle with their Chaos counterparts of House Korvax. Raven Principess Grevan was able to personally slay a traitor knight tyrant. At the same time, Ultramarines and Nova Marines arrived and launched an offensive onto the rock's surface as Tigurius himself led the main assault against the Black Legionnaires and brawled against Dark Angel's armor. By this time, Samael had managed to turn the Void War around in space and join with Tigurius' own fleet. Be'lakor cared little, however, for he had never intended to best any side in the war for the Rock, but only to ruin Vashtor's plans. Furious, Vashtor summoned a great strength to himself and took control of many nearby gun batteries, unleashing a barrage that toppled many war engines, warriors, and the badly wounded Be'lakor himself. As Be'lakor vanished into the warp, he did so with a howl of rage. As the Dark Master vanished, so did his disciples. It was now that the Dark Angels and Crusade reinforcements brought their full fury against Vashtor's surviving forces. On the surface, Vashtor knew all was lost, and he raged at his ruined plans. He promptly commanded his surviving warships to converge on the rock and extract his remaining forces. Precious few traitors were rescued, and the Archifane himself teleported back aboard the Aurak Unleashed and exited from the war zone. In the aftermath of the battle, abandoned Chaos Space Marines were taken prisoners to the torments of the Dark Angels. In the aftermath of the battle, Azrael greeted Tigurius and Grievon coldly and ordered the Imperials would draw away from the rock and the Dark Angels' fleet. Used to dealing with the Unforgiven, Tigurius obeyed, and the rock and its escorts re-entered the warp. However, for the Dark Angels, this matter was far from over. Meanwhile, interrogations of captive Chaos Space Marines under Asmodai revealed that Vashtor intended to flee to the Solminius stars. In truth, this was part of a new plan being devised by the Archifane. Part 4. Farsight. Return to Arthas Moloch. Meanwhile, the Tau Farsight enclaves battled an Orc Wa under war boss Nazdreg. In the end, Commander Farsight was able to launch an assault on the Orc fortress world of Dregok, and Nazdreg went missing in a massive vortex explosion. However, just as the Tau withdrew back into space to plan their next move, a Baal fleet under Demon Prince Ungalax arrived in system. Led by the Ark of Omen Unhallowed, they sought a key fragment located on the world. Ungalax's hosts consisted of many and varied elements from World Eaters, Gaghar the Savage, to the Night Lord's warband under the Flensing Prince. Alongside them were more than 2 scores of other Chaos Space Marine warbands, Traitor Guardsmen regiments, Chaos Knights, and 3 maniples of the Legio Vulturum. Ungalax observed the Tau and the Greenskins fleet at war over Dregok, but resisting the temptation instead made for the nearby world of Arthas Moloch. Before he could give the command, however, the World Eaters under Gaghar instead made right for the Xenos battle. This caused the Tau to withdraw and instead make for Arthas Moloch alongside a group of pursuing orcs. Farsight reached Arthas Moloch just hours ahead of his foes. Intent on stopping Chaos's plans, however, it may manifest. He immediately landed upon the world, then ordered his fleet scatter in the face of the incoming forces. Though melancholic at his forced return to this blighted world, he nonetheless organized his army to conduct a Carrion-style guerrilla warfare campaign aimed at drawing the orcs and the Chaos Force into destroying one another. So desperate was his situation that Farsight dispatched a torpedo drone to the Tau Empire requesting aid. The first weeks of the war on Arthas Moloch were bloody and anarchic. The Tau sought to fight on their own terms, falling back from unfavorable engagements and seeking to bait rampaging orc hordes into Chaos warbands. For his part, Ungalax was focused on recovering the key fragment located on the world. The madness of the world scrambled the minds of his slave psychers, preventing the fragment from being quickly recovered. While most of his forces held to their own mission, some, such as the Wordbearers under Asmor Bleakverse, spent more of their time capturing victims for sacrifice. Meanwhile, the 1,000 sons of the perplexing Weave became captivated by the world's ancient ruins and abandoned their mission to instead purge greenskins in a particularly well-preserved ruin belt. Despite the efficient Tau strategy, Ungalax was able to eventually discern their tactic and inflicted increasingly heavy losses on them. During the withdrawal from temporary airbase Zephyr 33, Farsight's close confidant Commander Brightsword was slain. Ungalax began to realize that he faced the stiffest Tau opposition in the ruined belt of Arthas Moloch's northern hemisphere. Intrigued, he began to believe that the Tau had hidden most of their command assets here, or, more importantly, were defending something that they did not want the Chaos forces to capture. The orcs meanwhile continued to pour down onto Arthas Moloch, and an especially skilled group of freebooters even boarded the Unhallowed itself. With Nazdreg's disappearance, several orcs had risen to command the remnants of his Wa. This included freebooter beast Snaga Bolrog Bigtusk, Gargant mob boss Kraga Thunderstomp, and the Goth mech boss Dasmog boss and his up-armored Speedwa. The Greenskins increasingly began to work together, forcing the Tau into smaller operation areas and frustrating Farsight. The heavy casualties and the loss of friends such as Brightsword and Oblotai began to take its mental toll of Oshova personally. War of attrition. By this point, the Tau were being pushed into the ruined zone around the Great Star Days. Rather than break out, an increasingly frustrated Farsight instead established a series of corridors to draw in most of his forces and establish what was dubbed the Star Days Exclusion Zone. He then instructed his best commanders to focus on decapitation strikes against Orc and Chaos Command assets, which succeeded in knocking out many Greenskin and Chaos Warlords alike, including the Night Lord's leader known as the Flensing Prince. These strikes also proved to spark infighting amongst his enemies and bought time for the Tau Empire reinforcements he hoped were on their way. During these actions, a vengeful Farsight fought in the thickest of the action, venting his frustration upon his foes. By the time of the Battle of the Haggard Tower against the huge Orc horde that the supposed ethereal aid finally arrived from the Tau Empire, during which Commander Bravestorm was badly injured. As Farsight oversaw the wounded Bravestorm's evacuation to a medical facility, a drone appeared projecting the image of Ethereal Supreme Aunva. Instead of offering salvation, however, the holographic message stated that Farsight had turned his back on the greater good through his actions and that the entire Farsight enclaves would be condemned with him. The message finished by stating he hoped Farsight would inflict much damage to the Chaos and Orc forces before his inevitable end. A furious Farsight destroyed the drone with his plasma rifle, then ordered his forces withdraw to their fallback positions while he went into a state of meditation to determine what their next move would be. In truth, Farsight had now become determined on his final desperate gambit to unleash the same enemies at the Great Star Days upon his foes that he had encountered during his first visit to Arthas Moloch. The Great Star Days. Farsight immediately ordered the Tau fleet scattered across the system return to Arthas Moloch and prepare for high-value extraction. All across the battlefront, Tau forces began to conduct a fighting and orderly withdrawal. As the Tau cordon decreased in size, Orc and Chaos forces began to clash more frequently, and Farsight sought to exploit this. Soon only Farsight, his commanders, and a few thousand warriors were left around the Great Star Days. At the same time, an Imperial Death Watch force aboard the Sword-class frigate Bleak Missive intercepted Farsight's communique. Watch Captain Tolonius concealed his codicil Kakechis, who in truth was an Alpha Legion infiltrator known as Lord Glass. Informing on the Death Watch to Vashtor, Lord Glass sought to acquire the key fragment of Arthas Moloch before Ungalax could do so. Lord Glass activated his trigger phrase aboard the Bleak Missive, that of Looking Glass, causing 20 of the 34 Space Marines abroad to reveal their true allegiance and rise up. Taking their loyalist brothers by complete surprise, the Alpha Legion quickly overran the frigate and set course for Arthas Moloch. Upon arriving, they abandoned the vessel to make planetfall as the Bleak Missive was blasted from space. The Alpha Legion's target was an ancient downed Dark Angel's Dark Talon fighter jet in which they believed the key fragment was held. By this point, Gahar and his World Eaters had launched a full-scale assault on the first Tau defenses around the Great Star Days. Massed waves of cultists and traitor guardsmen absorbed the Tau volley fire, allowing the Chaos Space Marines to draw in close and rip the Xenos to pieces. In their wake came tanks and demon engines. Ungalax himself surged forward alongside the column of Black Legion vehicles, and the Tau proved unable to halt the Chaos advance. Out on the Ashen Plains, Orc Gargants under Skraga's Fandastomp fought the Chaos Titans of the Legio Vulturum as the Knights and Stompas clashed around their feet. Other Orc warbands surged forward, creating a hectic three-sided battle for supremacy. A fourth faction entered the fray when Alpha Legionnaires under Lord Glass arrived, seeking the downed Dark Talon fighter. Using servitors to excavate the Dark Talon and the crystalline growth within, Lord Glass was overjoyed at acquiring the key fragment before Ungalax. Now they need only board the Unhallowed and offer up the fragment to the warp portal within to take credit with Vashtor for the discovery. Soon enough, Orc and Chaos forces began to reach the Great Star Days itself. Farsight pulled back his remaining forces while he and the remainder of the 8, now reduced to 5, made their stand on the dais itself. Resting the urge to surge forward and spill the blood of his enemies, Farsight instead stuck to his plan. This odd bloodlust was spreading throughout the Tau ranks, causing some normally disciplined warriors to venture out of their defenses to meet the oncoming foes. Farsight recognized some external force was influencing the Tau, but knew he must complete his mission before they all fell to madness. Only when the first wave of berserkers reached the daisies did Farsight and his remaining officers open fire. Orcs soon entered the kill box, and it was then that Farsight enacted his plan. He used the blood of the fallen enemies to influence the ancient structure, and soon enough demons began to manifest across the battlefield. What followed was absolute bedlam as orcs, mortal followers of chaos, demons, and Tau murdered one another. Using the anarchy as a distraction, Farsight ordered his remaining forces to attempt to slip away. Tau warships were in orbit over Arthas Moloch's northern hemisphere, blasting a path through enemy vessels for extraction. However, madness began to sweep through the Tau lines, and Farsight's battlesuit itself was transformed into a war engine to rival a titan. His Dawnblade had been replaced with an axe, and skulls appeared across his armor. Farsight began to view his plan to retreat as cowardice, and soon lost himself in rage as he hacked apart enemies. However, it was the thought that he should fight alone for himself and let his own troops, too weak to survive, fall that caused Farsight to recoil in horror, and a degree of sanity returned to him. As Farsight regained his senses and returned to his uncorrupted form, his battlesuit AI informed him that their window of retreat had now shrunk to mere minutes. Jetting back to the start days, Farsight gathered his remaining 8 to him and ordered that they were to fight no more this day. They would resist the urge to spill blood and instead shepherd their surviving troops out of the battle zone. Extraction was all that mattered now. Retreat was survival. Content to let the enemy destroy one another, the Tau withdrew north to the extraction zone. Shortly after the Tau departed, the Chaos forces also disappeared, having seemingly achieved their objective. Only greenskins remained on Arthas Moloch, who soon lost interest and looked elsewhere for a fight. After the enemy had departed, Farsight and his entourage quietly returned to Arthas Moloch to examine the Grey Star Daze and investigate its status. Farsight was pleased to find the corruption was gone and that organic life was beginning to develop on the world. Part 5. The Battle of Idolatros. The Lure. Following Vashator's assault on the rock, the Dark Angels and other chapters of the Unforgiven gathered in strength to learn of the Archiphane's stronghold and finish the demon once and for all. Ultimately, 3/4 of all Unforgiven strength was mustered at the Great Mobile Fortress Monastery. Meanwhile, torture of captured fallen revealed that Vashtor had taken refuge in the Idolatros system in the Somnius stars. Azrael and other assembled inner circle knew they were heading into a trap, but at the same time could not leave Vashtor free to wreak havoc upon the Imperium. Azrael dispatched several task forces of Unforgiven ahead of the main fleet in order to search for Vashtor's inevitable trap. At the same time, Ezekiel and other Unforgiven chief librarians sought to unravel the strands of fate and foresee what awaited them in the Somnium stars. Soon enough, Raven-winged scout fleets returned with word of waiting traitor armadas within the Idolatros system. These included not only the expected cult of the Archiphane and the Black Legion, but also Emperor's Children, Death Guard, and Wordbearers. Largest of all was the Ark of Omen Netherworld Blade and its Bale fleet, which was under the control of the Dark Mechanicum. For their part, the Unforgiven librarians under Ezekiel were able to confirm that Vashtor indeed dealt within the system, though they could offer little more information than that. Many other periphery chaos fleets lay in the Unforgiven's paths, and Azrael declared that several chapters such as the Cowled Wardens, Blades of Vengeance, and Guardians of the Covenant strike in the Scrilium and Apostra systems to deal with these foes. Into Idolatros. When the rock and its massive accompanying fleet finally arrived into the Idolatros system, it detected an unexpected concealed aberration, but the Raven-winged scouts had been accurate that a large Bale fleet lay in the path of the Unforgiven. Soon enough, both sides traded torpedo fire and attack crafts launched as the massive battle erupted. The Unforgiven had a significant advantage in numbers, but the Chaos forces had the advantage of Vashtor's infernal mastery of technology, as well as their weapons being seemingly boosted by the power of the Somnium stars. Soon enough, the Unforgiven suffered heavy casualties, and several capital ships were lost to highly advanced Chaos weaponry. For its part, the Ark of Omen Netherworld Blade was able to destroy an entire squadron of frigates of the Disciples of Caliban, as well as 2 strike cruisers. Undeterred, the Dark Angels launched boarding actions against several Chaos Demon ships and destroying them from within. From their stratagem aboard the rock, Azrael and his inner circle determined that the Netherworld Blade was simply stalling the best it could to buy time for reinforcements. Reinforcements that the Unforgiven were simultaneously ambushing in the periphery systems. Master Samael led a Raven-Wing detachment in boarding the Netherworld Blade from his flagship Impeccable Justice. They were joined by reinforcements from several Unforgiven strike forces as supporting capital ships knocked out the Arks of Omen engines one by one. Yet the Ark did not die quietly, and in its death throes destroyed the Redoubtable and badly damaged 5 other vessels. By the time the Unforgiven withdrew, the Ark was a shattered, hollowed-out ruin. Satisfied, Azrael ordered his fleet regroup and make for their true target, Vashtor. Hours passed by as the Unforgiven fleet pressed deeper into the Idolatrous system with only scattered signs of the enemy. During this time, Tech Marines identified a mysterious warp resonance that was seemingly growing in strength, though its purpose could not be summarized. It began to interfere with mechanical systems and even the minds of those in the Unforgiven fleet. Finally, the Unforgiven fleet came in sight of what Vashtor had been constructing, a planet-sized mechanical monstrosity of infernal warp technology. To Azrael's horror, he realized that the Archifane had acquired and modified remnants of the ancient Dark Angels' homeworld of Caliban. To the forces of chaos, they deemed the abomination Wormwood. Worse still, Abaddon the Despoiler and a large Black Legion fleet emerged from a warp subdimension that had been constructed by Vashtor's infernal technology. Wormwood. The Supreme Grand Master of the Unforgiven ordered his fleet make a full-on attack on Vashtor's perversion of the Dark Angels' legacy. The Dark Angels led boarding parties on the ruin of Caliban, now reclassified as the demon world Wormwood, including Azrael himself. The basic Unforgiven plan was to clear the primary continental of orbital defenses to allow the Rock and its accompanying fleet to enact an exterminatus on a scale unseen since the Horus Heresy. On the surface of Wormwood, the Unforgiven met not only Chaos Space Marines, but also demons, demon engines, Dark Skitarii, and cultists. The Unforgiven fought their way towards the traitor bastion dubbed the Dark Cathedrum. Azrael and his own forces struck at a continental megastructure known as the Warpforged Palace, which Unforgiven Tech Marines had identified as something similar to a teleportarium, which held the assembled key fragments that the Chaos forces had gathered. Alongside Ezekiel, Belial, and Asmodai, Azrael struck at the Warpforged Palace as Angels of Redemption, Cowled Wardens, and Bladeskeepers conducted diversionary attacks. After many nightmarish hours of battle which included facing the demon prince Paraxelis, Azrael and his entourage at last reached the heart of the Warpforged Palace. There, they confronted an altar of Calibanite ruins on which the key fragments had been ferried. Now, however, the altar was the site of a huge brass shrine to Krorn, which was defended by World Eaters and House Baskar. At its center was a vast summoning circle, and from it emerged Angron, Primarch of the World Eaters. In orbit, the Unforgiven found themselves hard-pressed by Abaddon's fleet, led by the Vengeful Spirit, and Vashtor's Bel fleet, led by the Ark of Omen, Aurak Unleashed. The Unforgiven fleet was led by Grandmaster Nakir of the Consecrators, but they were sandwiched between the weaponry of Wormwood and the Chaos Armada. Abaddon and Falcus Kyber led a boarding operation on the Raven-Wing flagship Impeccable Justice, scuttling the vessel and sending its remains tumbling into the Loyalist fleet. Its warp drive then detonated, devastating the Unforgiven. Fortunately for the Unforgiven, a Loyalist armada of Blood Angels and Imperial Navy under Regent Dante soon translated into the Idolatros system. Though not knowing how these allies had known of the Unforgiven's crusade, Nakir nonetheless was relieved by these new arrivals. From his flagship Absolution's Ire, Dante ordered the attack. However, still unknown to the Unforgiven, Dante carried with him a special passenger. Lionel Johnson, the recently reawakened Primarch of the Dark Angels. Dante's arrival. To Dante's surprise, however, the Lion no longer could be discovered aboard his flagship. The Blood Angels chapter master quickly summarized that he had used his own new abilities to manifest on Caliban's surface. Trusting a son of the Emperor to carry out his own task, Dante proceeded with his own plan and sent Imperial Navy reinforcements to bolster the defenses of the Rock, as his own Blood Angels fleet plunged into the desperate orbital battle. At his arrival, Dante proudly announced the return of Lionel Johnson, which was met by utter disbelief and shock by the Unforgiven. Nakir bombarded Dante with questions and oaths before stating that he now owed the Blood Angels a debt which could never be repaid. Together, Nakir and Dante sought to stabilize the desperate situation in orbit. Seeing the Blood Angels fleet inbound, Abaddon ordered his ships disengage from their present actions and reform for a counterattack. For his part, Vashtor was irked by these new arrivals, but undeterred. He recognized his vessels and led the Aurak Unleashed towards the Rock. Once within the range of the Rock, Vashtor used his technological mastery to establish contact with the prize he had sought all along, the ancient Tuchulka engine, which had become embedded in the Rock millennia ago. Already, Vashtor had acquired its sister engine, Ouroboros and Plagueheart, and with the third and final piece could create the Dissonance engine in order to use the key to access an Old One vault from the days of the War in the Heaven. After exchanging a sting of questions and dialogue, Vashtor and the Tuchula vanished into another realm entirely. Inside the pocket dimension, at the heart of Wormwood, Vashtor and Tuchula manifested alongside the Ouroboros and Plagueheart. Finally, the Archifame began to complete his work by completing the Dissonance engine. However, the action proved to shatter the Aurak Unleashed alongside its Abombo intelligence, the Aurak Myriad. Following the destruction of the Aurak Unleashed, the Chaos fleet in orbit now found itself badly outmatched. The Rock and Imperial Navy vessels plunged forward, seeking to reinforce the Unforgiven and Blood Angels near Wormwood. Back on Wormwood's surface, Azrael led a desperate defense against the might of Angron and his World Eaters. The Deathwing and Librarians conducted a rearguard action to allow Azrael and the core of his forces into a string of Gothic structures, though the cost had been terrible and Belial badly wounded by Angron himself. Several World Eaters attacks led by Angron and the new Unforgiven defense lines had failed, but at a great cost. Soon enough, the Unforgiven now found themselves encircled and awaiting inevitable destruction. Just then, a golden host led by Dante himself emerged from the sky to save the Dark Angels. Together with these new allies, the Dark Angels led a general counterattack to break out their siege. Amidst the chaotic battle, Azrael and Dante coordinated their actions despite a lack of Vox contact. Angron clearly had to be dealt with first, and the Blood Angels focused most of their fire upon this foe. Dante and his sanguinary guard fell upon the Red Angel alongside assault squads and Redemptor dreadnoughts. Faced with this trap, even Angron staggered in the face of the Blood Angel's assault. However, such was the might of Angron that not even this could subdue him. Despite coming under attack from all sides, the Red Angel endured, and atop a high tower bested not only the Blood Angel's elite, but even Dante himself. After destroying both Redemptor dreadnoughts, Azrael watched in horror as the battered Angron threw Dante to the ground and was about to deliver the killing blow, finally giving him release. Horror turned to disbelief as shadows erupted from the spot between Angron and Dante. From these shadows strode Lionel Johnson, the second time a Primarch screws Dante's death, who deflected Angron's blow. The Lion was not alone. His loyalist fallen, known as the Risen, emerged beside him. Despite the countless questions that surged across their minds, the Dark Angels only felt jubilation at the arrival of their Primarch. Azrael ordered a furious counterattack led by the Deathwing, and the Unforgiven pressed forward with a renewed zeal. The Lion quickly withdrew from Dante's broken body to draw away Angron. The Red Angel rained a constant stream of blows upon the Lion, but against such a foe, even Angron was hard-pressed. The Lion briefly met Azrael's gaze, and in that moment knew that it was up to the Supreme Grand Master to win the day on Wormwood and recover the broken Blood Angels, while L. Johnson dealt with Angron, the Angel, and the Beast. On Wormwood itself, the Unforgiven and their new allies continued their assault, but were hampered by the ever-shifting puzzle-like terrain and traps of the mechanical world. Amidst all of this battle, the Lion and Angron. While L. Johnson was disgusted by the corrupted form of his former brother, Angron felt only some dim recognition at the Lion. The two demigods fought their way across Wormwood, and with the Lion armed with his new weapons, Fealty and the Emperor's Shield, even Angron was facing extreme challenge. The battle between the two was titanic and saw them tumble into structures and Angron through vehicles as if they were missiles. As Wormwood shifted, the ground crumbled beneath them and their battle continued as the two plunged below. By now, Azrael had linked up with the new acting Blood Angels commander, Alphael of the Second Company. They fought their way to the remains of the Sanguinary Guard, where they found several survivors, including Dante. Dante was held back to his feet, and together with Azrael and Alphael, they planned their next course of action. Entrusting Nakir to enact the Exterminatus plan, Dante and Azrael focused on extracting their warriors by seeking to establish several stable landing zones for gunships to land. The first to fall before the renewed Imperial plan were the World Eaters of the Warpforged Palace, which were overwhelmed on all sides by Blood Angels and Unforgiven. Dante and Azrael then ordered their forces to form up and make for the nearest extraction zone. When asked about the Lion's status, Azrael stated he did not know where his Gene Father was gone, but had faith that he would find his way back into orbit with them. Meanwhile, the Lion and Angron continued their battle in the industrial depths of Wormwood. As they fought closer to its core, they began to penetrate the veil between reality and the Empyrean. After fighting across demonic assembly lines, the two found themselves back on the surface. The Lion sought to use their new environment to enact his plan, while Angron had by now grown into an even greater fury than usual. Using the industrial steam to his advantage, the Lion was able to use Angron's own strike to push the point of his power sword, Fealty, into the Demon Primarch's throat. The wound was such that not even Angron could quickly regenerate from it, and while he lay on his back, the Lion used up the point of the Emperor's Shield to decapitate his corrupted brother. As Angron exploded back into the warp, the Lion was victorious but badly wounded. L. Johnson hefted himself to his feet and now sought to escape Wormwood. By now, Azrael and Dante were nearing their own extraction zone. Despite the infernal horrors of Wormwood, including roaming tentacles and shattering terrain, Imperial gunships conducted several waves of evacuations. Yet the Blood Angels and Dark Angels were now faced with new foes in the form of Nurglite demons. Azrael took command to hold off these enemies with heavy fire as Dante and Samael led assault elements around their flanks. During the subsequent fighting, Dante saved a group of Deathwing carrying the injured Belial from a group of demon engines, as Samael waged a breakout attempt to establish a corridor to allow his allies to escape. Samael's charge was met by a huge Great Unclean One known as Urkhablax, and the route to salvation now seemed closed. However, it was then that the Lion emerged before Azrael, and despite being infuriated by the presence of the Risen, the Supreme Grand Master quickly worked alongside his Gene Father. The Risen threw themselves at the Great Unclean One and his demons as Samael was ordered to break through the Chaos lines at any cost. Together, this renewed Imperial counterattack was able to smash through the demonic ambush. As the Blood Angels and Dark Angels broke through under the Raven Wing, Urgablax was subdued by an army of Risen. Finally reaching their extraction zone, Dante and Azrael were the last to board their gunships and make for space. As they left, the Rock opened up its guns on Wormwood and seemingly delivered a killing blow to the ruins of Caliban. The Key awakens. Though they had by now apparently succeeded in destroying Wormwood and pushing back Abaddon's fleet, Azrael and Dante's forces had experienced grievous losses. The Lion had also fought his way back into orbit and announced over Vox that to stay in the vicinity of Wormwood was to risk annihilation. The traitors had awakened something in the core of the planet, and it was now beyond the ability of the Rock to even destroy it. Azrael and Dante ordered a general withdrawal. Aboard the Vengeful Spirit, Abaddon felt satisfaction at the devastating losses he had inflicted upon his foes, but bitterness at the arrival of another loyalist Primarch. It was then that Vashtor established contact with Abaddon, announcing that he had succeeded in the construction of the Dissonance Engine, and with it, the awakening of the Key. Using the Ascended Wormwood, they could now claim the lock, and with it, the weapon. Shortly after, Wormwood tore open the veil of reality itself and plunged into a swirling abyss. Aftermath. Ultimately, the Arks of Omen campaign can be credited as a Chaos strategic victory despite the return of Lionel Johnson. Vaxter succeeded in assembling the key fragments and now sought to find the lock in order to obtain the weapon. The Inquisition under Kotias recognizes as such and has ordered all available assets to be used to stop the Archifane at all costs. Boy, that's a campaign, isn't it? If you managed to reach this far, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps the channel grow. Nevertheless, I'll see you in the next one. Arrivederci.